What are some moments in movies that made you go, it doesn't work like that? My dad was a pipe engineer for 35 years. Every time he watches the Titanic, when Jack is handcuffed to the pipe, he has to point out to everyone in the room how the curved elbow pipe in the shot didn't exist at the time. The correct setup should have been two straight pieces soldered together to make a corner pipe. I love him and his obscure dad facts. Edit. I just showed this to my dad. He's not familiar with Reddit, but he appreciates the love. Here's one you can give back to him. In Back to the Future, when Marty plays with the band at the dance in 1955, he's playing a Gibson 345, which didn't come out until 1958. Almost any scene involving someone being shot or stabbed. As a cop, I've dealt with many stabbing victims. People don't just drop like sacks of potatoes when they are stabbed or have their throats slit. I once had to respond to an incident where two guys got into a knife fight. Ended up having to help keep pressure on wounds as we waited for paramedics, and he pulled through. His neck was wide open and he had 23 punctures in his abdomen and arms, but he was still energetic and down to fight. When it comes to gunshots, you're not going to instantly drop unless something vital is hit. Heart, brain, ECT. Makes me laugh a little when watching movies and bad guys drop dead when they are shot or cut in any way by the good guys. Throat slit and the victim drops to the ground motionless. Pretty much any scene that involves biologists. Look, the DNA is a perfect match, as the computer superimposes two identical graphics that are basically just the symbol for DNA. And the fact that it takes them a few seconds to get the results. And the only PPE the person running it is wearing is a pair of nitrile gloves. Not even a fucking lab coat. I'm looking at you, Dexter, like, yeah, the DNA matches. I bet every sample you run matches, because all of it has your DNA in it, because you are eating a sandwich in the lab. Avalanches. Particularly when someone gets buried and then just bursts out of the snow unharmed. Avalanche debris sets like concrete. You're not getting out without help. And most deaths/injuries occur from being bashed up during the slide. So you're not likely to emerge unscathed if it's big enough to bury you. A fake trauma occurs from terrain traps, not necessarily the size. In now most more deaths are from trauma, whereas in Europe, where above tree line terrain is much more accessible, fatalities are typically deep burials. Also, sound triggering avalanches is a big one. It was only when I began living in an avalanche danger zone that I learned sound caused avalanches weren't real. The Simpsons lead to me. People in movies being scientists, meaning they are good at all forms of science, biology, electrical engineering, physics, programming, communication protocols, advanced mathematics, hacking, robotics. Sure, you could have some knowledge in all of those fields, but specializing in just one of them takes decades. These characters are usually wizards in all fields. CW is hilarious with this stuff. Felicity in Arrow is working tech support at a corporation. When we meet her, she's the most brilliant hacker in the world. When in Supergirl is it at a newspaper, a season or two later he's basically the head science dude at a black ops government agency. I'll give a pass to Cisco and Caitlin, since they actually do work at a super science lab in the Flash. But Barry is on par with them with just a degree in chemistry and physics. Caitlin actually called out Cisco on this in the most recent episode. She was like, "You're working on a biology problem, why aren't you consulting your friend the biologist?" Pumping the shotgun every time you mean business. You're just ejecting fresh shells into the floor. Especially when it's a break action double barrel shotgun. In Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in one of the beginning episodes, Ward somehow pumps his double barrel shotgun. Crawling through air ducts. Most aren't that big, or they aren't that strong to not bend or break at all. Edit. Yes, they are also incredibly filthy. I have taken out enough ductwork to know that you could almost create another person with how many skin cells end up in your air ducts. I also am not doubting the strength of the large threaded supports some ductwork has. I'm doubting the strength of the 20 gauge metal to not end bend in the slightest under the weight of a full grown man. Aren't they full of screws and other sharp jabby bits too? 'Cause, ick now. They aren't designed for crawling through, so you can just anchor shit anywhere. They're also always filthy inside, and depending on which end you enter they get progressively smaller to maintain static pressure. Forget it if you get into a kitchen's grease duct. 90% of the depictions of women going into labor, it's rarely mom feels fine all day, suddenly has one sharp contraction, water immediately breaks, and makes a puddle on the floor. Everyone I know who's given birth has had at least a few hours contracting before the water breaking, if it breaks at all, and then it can be even longer before you're in active labor. I'm a labor doula. Was looking for this answer. Most of the time the water doesn't break until the pushing phase. Add to that, movies portray mom feeling fine all day, has sudden sharp contraction, and then everyone is freaking out to rush her to the hospital. First, you shouldn't do this. Second, most hospitals are just going to send you home. Labor is generally a long process. There are exceptions, but especially for first-time moms, it is going to be a long while. There is no reason to rush to the hospital, and early labor the contractions are bearable and mom can go about her day as she has them. She isn't being stopped in her tracks as she has them, and moaning and groaning with each one. That comes later. Labor in movies and on TV is ridiculous. And early labor the contractions are bearable and mom can go about her day as she has them. I went into labor last weekend and didn't even know it until my contractions were 3 minutes apart. I labored most of Sunday morning and afternoon thinking I was just having back cramps. I even did laundry and went out to dinner. An explosion nearby and everyone talks and hears fine. I love that scene and the other guys about this. Good damn it, tinnitus. You are a cruel mistress. Rolling out of a speeding car. Nah man, you're about to look like you made out with a cheese grater. There is no cleaning up before or after sex. Everyone is just ready to go all the time. To add to this comment, what are supposed to be virgins having sex for the first time? Each fucking time. Penetration gasp of ecstasy and they automatically just good at it. No awkwardness at all. Like what, mate? Don't even get me started on lesbian sex. They either flail around a little bit ineffectually and then cut scene, because God forbid we actually see it. Or with absolutely no foreplay one of them starts violently fingering the other one with the terrifying gusto of a pirate boat's wing at the fairground. Like, we're lesbians. We know where the clitoris is and it ain't somewhere around the top of her cervix, you bloody monster. Our hero is beaten, stabbed and shot. Next scene he wakes up bandaged in the hospital. Within seconds, he yanks out all the tubes and wires, jumps out of bed, finds his suddenly clean clothes, and rushes out to continue his quest. In the next scene he's full of energy as he pursues his foe, and while his face may have a single scratch or bandage cut, usually above one eye, there's no sign of what would ordinarily be a yellow-purple swollen pulpy mess with blood-red eyes. There's an episode of the Rewishables podcast about Die Hard, and they have a brief funny conversation along the lines of, okay, movie's over. John McClane is taken to the hospital. What are his injuries? I like how the movie actually plays into that towards the end with the final confrontation. The bit where an exhausted, sweat and blood drenched John staggers into the vault and just screams Hans. It's possibly my favorite part of the movie. I know Die Hard probably isn't super realistic, but I like that it tries to be a bit more reserved in the action movie violence and shows John slowly grinding to a halt at the end. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.